Thank you for joining us for Mini-Bite 5 of BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner's web-based learning sessions on misinformation. This session provides examples of actions that stop the spread of misinformation. If you haven't watched Mini-Bites 1, 2, 3, and 4, we encourage you to do so. Mini-Bite 1 introduces BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, offers an overview of all 5 mini-bites, and explains how to use the different components of these web-based learning sessions. Mini-Bite 2 considers how misinformation works. Mini-Bite 3 explores why misinformation is a human rights issue. And Mini-Bite 4 considers strategies to identify and stop the spread of misinformation. In Mini-Bite 5, we will consider examples of actions. During this session, we will ask you to reflect. So consider pausing this recording and downloading the handouts package, which is located beside this mini-bite on our Misinformation Can You Stop It webpage. You can record your reflections in the fillable forms in these handouts. Or you may prefer to have a pen and paper available to write down your thoughts if you find that helpful. In Mini-Bite 5, we will explore examples of actions that community members have taken and consider what BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner is doing to stop the spread of misinformation at the systemic level. In this session, we will be sharing specific examples of misinformation that community members and our office have identified. Some of the examples target specific groups based on their identity. These may bring up memories of harms that you or someone you care about has experienced. So please do what you need to do to take care of yourself during the session. This may include pausing the recording until you feel ready to continue.
Before we share actions that community members and our office have taken to address misinformation, let's take a moment to reflect. Can you think of an example of misinformation that has impacted your community? Which group or groups were impacted by the misinformation? Are you aware of any actions taken to address it? Can you think of other actions that might address this issue? You can record your reflections in Handout 1, Question 1, and you may wish to pause the recording to download the handouts package and record your reflections. As part of our Misinformation Can You Stop It campaign, BCOHRC provided grants to 50 community amplifiers across all regions of the province. Communities included First Nations organizations, youth groups, school groups, and community organizations. Community amplifiers developed campaigns or community awareness projects to address human rights issues related to misinformation in their communities. These projects were developed independently from BCOHRC, and they do not necessarily reflect the views of the Commissioner. However, they each provide important community-based insights into local issues and actions. They also demonstrate how communities can take localized action on mis- and disinformation. We'll highlight 4 of these projects in this mini-bite. Before we introduce the Community Amplifiers projects, we'd like to provide a content advisory. The following examples of actions were developed to raise awareness of misinformation about Indigenous peoples, people with intellectual disabilities, and LGBTQ2SAI+ people.
One of the community amplifier groups we'd like to highlight is Stolo Community Futures Corporation. This organization offers business support to current and aspiring Indigenous entrepreneurs and community-owned businesses on Stolo traditional territory. Stolo Community Futures Corporation's Amplifier Project was developed to address the impacts of discriminatory misinformation on Indigenous business owners. The first action taken by Stolo Community Futures Corporation was to develop a miscommunication survey for Indigenous business owners. The survey results reveal that misinformation deeply impacts Indigenous businesses and entrepreneurs, with the majority of respondents stating they had experienced its harm to their business. For example, 37.5% of business owners who answered the question indicated that they were subjected to misinformation about, quote, free funding, end quote. The impacts of this misinformation included emotional stress, financial loss, and reputational harm. The survey results also reveal that misinformation often originates from within communities, family dynamics, community relationships, and, at times, leadership structures. These findings highlighted the need for culturally sensitive approaches to address these challenges. Survey respondents identified a strong need for public education, community support, and practical tools to respond to misinformation. These insights informed the development of culturally appropriate resources and awareness materials to better support Indigenous-owned businesses. We'll explore those resources on the next slide. Stolo Community Futures Corporation developed 2 resources for Indigenous entrepreneurs based on the survey findings. The Stop Miscommunication resources are presented in 2 formats, a RAC card and an educational resource. The RAC card identifies the harms caused by misinformation and provides tips to respond to misinformation with clarity, respect, and confidence. It expands on BCOHRC's Misinformation Can You Stop It tool by providing several tips for each stop letter that are adapted for specific use by Indigenous business owners. It also provides additional strategies to address misinformation within the community and protect businesses and their reputations. The final section of the RAC card provides culturally appropriate advice for responding to misinformation, and it provides contact information to access further support. The educational resource provides similar content presented in a different format.
Another community amplifier we'd like to highlight is Fort St. John Association for Community Living, or FSJACL. This organization promotes inclusion, equal opportunities, and community participation for individuals with disabilities by supporting them to live, learn, work, and thrive as valued members of society. Their project focuses on challenging the misconception that people with developmental disabilities and complex needs cannot make their own decisions, take risks, or live independently. These types of misinformation limit opportunities for inclusion, employment, and self-expression. The Fort St. John's Association for Community Living Misinformation Project is a multi-episode mini-series within their Shining Brighter podcast. This mini-series focuses on identifying and challenging common myths and misconceptions about people living with developmental disabilities and complex needs. It explores how misinformation shows up in everyday life, particularly in employment, independence, mental health, and community inclusion. Through conversation with self-advocates, support workers, leadership, families, and community partners, the podcast highlights real lived experiences that directly counter harmful assumptions. By centering authentic voices and storytelling, the project aims to replace misinformation with understanding, respect, and a more accurate representation of people's abilities, goals, and contributions. Episodes are published on YouTube and shared through email newsletters, making them accessible for both local and broader online audiences. You can find the links to the podcast in Handout 2. Using clips from the podcast series, Fort St. John Association for Community Living developed a social media campaign to counter misinformation about people with disabilities. Short clips, quotes, and myth versus reality messaging were shared across social platforms to increase reach and engagement. This is an example of one of the social media posts. The post reads, "Adults have rights to risk. Evelyn shares how we're not here to bubble wrap lives." We'll play that clip now.
Instead of assuming someone can't do something, assume they can. Right? It's not that hard of a switch to make. And you assume someone can do something until that person themselves tells you, hey, I need help with this.
Oh, perfect.
You can find other posts on their Facebook page.
A third community amplifier we'd like to highlight is CATET Climate Alliance. This group is a community-based organization in Powell River that claims that it seeks partnerships and collaborates on projects and campaigns that benefit the community, reduce greenhouse gas emission, and make the community more resilient in the face of climate impacts. Katet Climate Alliance's project was developed to address climate change denial and misinformation, which are spreading in their community. The Alliance is concerned that climate change denial has slowed down Powell River's previous modest progress towards addressing and adapting to climate change. The Climate Alliance identified the particular vulnerability of marginalized groups to impacts of climate change as an important human rights issue. To raise awareness of these issues, Katet Climate Alliance hosted 2 public talks and Q&A sessions. 2 experts spoke about strategies to counteract climate change misinformation. Science educator and climate advocate Jennifer Nathan described connections between anti-climate change groups and fossil fuel interests. To address this issue, Nathan advocated for promotion of critical thinking skills to expose the hidden agendas and vested interests behind climate change in misinformation. Blair Weber, a researcher with the Okanagan Research Cluster and UBC, focused on misinformation and conspiracy narratives that arose during wildfire evacuations in BC. Weber called for deep canvassing, which involves in-person conversations to overcome climate misinformation spread through social media. Links to the recording with Jennifer Nathan is available in handout 2. The events raised awareness about myths and disinformation about climate change and encouraged attendees to become more actively involved in addressing it. As one volunteer noted, I had no idea how insidious the reach of the climate disinformation machine was before this event. The program left me inspired to learn more and to work with Katet Climate Action to create healthy and just communities, starting with where I live.
The final amplifier we'll highlight is Advocacy Canada, based in Kelowna. Advocacy Canada collaborates with grassroots groups, service agencies, educators, and community providers to strengthen inclusion and counter harmful narratives through education, advocacy, and community engagement. Advocacy Canada's Amplifier project focused on misinformation surrounding SOGI 123, a teaching resource that supports inclusivity for LGBTQ2SAI+ students and their families. You can learn more about this resource in Mini Bites 2 and 3. Advocacy Canada identifies misinformation about SOGI 123 as one of the most pervasive sources of confusion and stigma affecting their community, especially queer and trans youth. To address these harmful impacts of misinformation, Advocacy Canada developed a project called Transform the Words. Transform the Words was designed to create accessible, trauma-informed, and non-confrontational spaces to explore misinformation about SOGI, while encouraging creativity and reflection rather than debate. Advocacy Canada brought together 13 community organizations to create a community installation. Participants were invited to reflect, individually or through group conversations, on online content that ranged from positive and affirming to harmful. Participants were then invited to transform origami paper into cranes. 1,577 paper cranes were created and assembled into one large rainbow curtain installation. The installation was displayed at the downtown Kelowna Library. The project ended with a public gathering with 48 guests that Advocacy Canada described as a, quote, simple yet effective event that truly reflected how individual acts of reflection can come together to form something visible, collective, and deeply meaningful. In summarizing the impacts of the session, the organizers noted the strength of a collective community effort, stating that, quote, each crane represents the time, energy, and presence of real people who showed up in their own way, unquote. This photo shows an example of this work. More photos and information about this project are available in handout 2. Other community amplifiers carried out actions to raise awareness to address a variety of issues related to a local human rights issue related to misinformation. These actions and those that we presented in this mini-bite may inspire you to take actions to address similar issues in your own community. You can learn more about each action on our Community Amplifiers webpage. The link to that page is provided in Handout 2. We invite you to pause this recording now to explore the different issues that these groups identified and the actions that they developed to address these issues. As you review these examples, take a minute to reflect. Think about the human rights issue in your community related to misinformation that you identified. Do any of the Community Amplifiers examples inspire you to take action? Which elements of these actions could you use to address this issue? What could you do differently? You can record your ideas in Handout 1, Question 2. It's important to highlight that the decision to act is a personal one. It can depend on whether you have the capacity and whether taking action puts you at risk. Taking the time to learn about successful actions by engaging with this mini-bite is an important first step. If you do decide to take action, we hope these examples provide inspiration.
Misinformation does not only result from one person intentionally or accidentally spreading lies. Online misinformation can also result from gaps in laws and policies. For example, social media companies may fail to enforce their own guidelines over speech on their platforms. And in both online and offline spaces, misinformation may be part of a broader approach to public policy and dialogue. As we discussed in Mini-Bite 3, misinformation has contributed to an increasing tendency to undervalue the importance of evidence when developing policies. And misinformation has contributed to changes in our understanding of shared truth. In this way, misinformation is a systemic issue. Individual actions may be useful in addressing specific issues related to misinformation, but a more global, systemic approach, which addresses root causes of these issues, is needed to significantly limit the development and spread of misinformation and to address the harms caused by misinformation. This systemic approach includes identifying the underlying laws, policies, and practices that allow misinformation to be developed and spread. It can also mean putting in place laws, policies, and practices to consistently address harms resulting from misinformation. And finally, a systemic approach involves providing information to counter misinformation that is widely accepted. We'll give examples over the next several slides. Over the next few slides, we will explore some of the actions that BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner has taken to address misinformation at the systemic level. These actions include highlighting the importance of evidence-based information in public debates, putting forward recommendations to social media companies, publishing evidence-based reports and position papers that counter misinformation, offering education that raises awareness of misinformation and its impacts, and providing tools to identify and stop its spread. Increasingly, misinformation has been introduced into debates around policy decisions that impact our human rights. Healthy debate around these decisions, where differing perspectives are considered, is vital to a functioning democracy. But, as explained in Mini-Bite 3, misinformation harms human rights by limiting our access to the information we need to make informed decisions. And when decisions based on misinformation are used to shape policies and laws, those policies and laws can have harmful impacts on the human rights of the groups targeted by misinformation. In May 2026, BC's Human Rights Commissioner released a public statement called Return to Facts as Misinformation Undermines Human Rights and Democratic Systems in BC. This statement explains the decision of the Commissioner to publish this statement, based on her mandate to promote and protect human rights in the province. It also highlights the human rights impacts of misinformation. The statement acknowledges the role of healthy debate in functioning democracies, and at the same time, it highlights the importance of ensuring that the ideas considered in debate are based on evidence and not informed by misinformation. Finally, the statement describes the responsibilities of the public and elected officials to protect human rights in our province. The statement provides examples of what it refers to as clouds of misinformation that harmfully impact public debate and resulting policies. These include misinformation related to colonization and its impacts, school-based materials on sexual health and gender identity, free speech and the laws governing it, and the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, or DRIPA. For each example, the statement identifies what is up for debate, including concerns the policy is addressing and what approaches to use to address those concerns, and what is not up for debate, including evidence-based facts upon which policy decisions must be made, and what is not up for debate, including evidence-based facts upon which policy decisions must be made. Handout 2 provides a link to this statement.
Under BC's Human Rights Code, BC's Human Rights Commissioner's mandate includes making recommendations to government and other organizations that are under the jurisdiction of the Code. These include organizations that provide services to the public, employ people, and provide housing. The goal of these recommendations is to encourage the provincial government and organizations to meet their responsibilities and protect our human rights that are outlined in the Code and international law. For example, in BCOHRC's From Hate to Hope, Report of the Inquiry into Hate in the COVID-19 Pandemic, the Commissioner made recommendations to address the rise in hate in the province during the pandemic. While the report recommendations aim to address hate in all its forms, specific recommendations target hate stemming from misinformation on online platforms. Over the next few slides, we'll explore some of the recommendations that address misinformation's role in contributing to the rise in hate. These recommendations focus on two areas: the kindergarten through grade 12 education system and social media companies' policies, processes, and platform design. If implemented, these recommendations could reduce the incidence of hate provoked by misinformation. They could also reduce the incidence of other human rights harms linked to misinformation by minimizing the spread of misinformation that promotes divisiveness and polarization, promotes prejudice and stereotypes, contributes to the spread of conspiracy theories, and provokes discrimination. These human rights impacts were presented in Mini-Bite 3. Information about the Hate to Hope inquiry and links to sources used to inform the content of this section are provided in Handout 2. Some of the Commissioner's recommendations focused on changes to the kindergarten through grade 12 education system. These included providing skills and tools to improve students' digital literacy, and implementing curriculum to support the development of knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors that limit students' vulnerability to misinformation. More information about these recommendations and supporting documents is available in Handout 2. A second set of recommendations focused on changes to social media platforms. These recommendations address the ways that the design, policies, and processes of social media platforms contribute to misinformation and inspire hate. We'll begin by reviewing social media companies' policies and processes that contribute to the spread of misinformation. In Mini-Bite 2, we explored how creators of disinformation benefit from social media policies and processes to mislead us. In Mini-Bite 2, we explored how creators of disinformation benefit from social media policies and processes to mislead us. One process involves the removal of independent fact-checking, which flags content as misinformation. This has been replaced with a system where platform users monitor and comment on whether posts are factual. Two additional examples include changes to social media platforms' hate speech policies and the inadequate enforcement of policies to limit hate speech. These changes contribute to an increase in misinformation, which would previously have been identified as hate speech. And a final process is the use of algorithms to target people with shared values and fears. This results in the spread of misinformation among people who share specific interests and values and leads them towards more extreme views. Handout 2 provides links to more detailed information on how each of these policies and processes contribute to the spread of misinformation that promotes hate. Aspects of platform design also contribute to the spread of misinformation. One aspect of platform design is to place advertisements beside harmful misinformation. This approach is used to increase profits for social media companies. It also contributes to the spread of harmful misinformation among people with shared values and fears. Another aspect of social media platform design is anonymity. By allowing people to post harmful misinformation anonymously with no consequences, anonymity contributes to the spread of misinformation. To address these aspects of social media platforms' policies, practices, and design that contribute to the spread of misinformation, the Commissioner made recommendations to social media companies. These included ensuring enforcement of rigorous policies and processes to address hateful content, reforming algorithms to favor less divisive, discriminatory, and misleading content, ending the placement of advertisements beside hateful content, and allowing independent audits to assess ongoing risks of increased hate created by platform design. The regulation of social media companies is under federal jurisdiction. Because of this, these recommendations were made directly to social media companies.
Another type of action that BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner has taken is to provide evidence-based information to counter misinformation. This can include reports and position papers that provide evidence to disprove the misinformation. This action addresses misinformation that contributes to human rights-related harms, including divisiveness and polarization, prejudices, biases, and stereotypes, the spread of conspiracy theories, and discrimination and hate. It can also address misinformation that limits our ability to make informed choices and harms democracy. The Commissioner's reports and position papers counter misinformation on a variety of themes. These include misinformation that has contributed to harmful policies related to health, policing, including school liaison officers, and media access to information. We have included links to these reports in handout 2, and we'll explore one example on the next slide. BC's Provincial Health Officer declared the toxic drug crisis a public health emergency in 2016. Between 2016 and 2026, over 18,000 people have died from drug poisoning in the province. Unregulated drug toxicity is now the leading cause of death in BC for people aged 19 to 59. As of September 2025, the number of unregulated drug deaths was equal to 5.3 deaths per day. In Mini-Bite 3, we described how misinformation about the toxic drug crisis has contributed to government policy decisions that do not effectively address this issue and put substance users at risk. Misinformation about this crisis stigmatizes substance users as having moral failings, blames the current crisis on the safe supply model, and advocates for interventions that are not supported by evidence. These interventions include criminalizations of substance use and the ending of safe supply services. In November 2025, BC's Human Rights Commissioner, Kasari Govender, released the position statement called A Human Rights Approach to the Toxic Drug Crisis. The goals of this statement included countering the misinformation that guides current substance use policies and advocating for the implementation of evidence-informed human rights-based policies. The statement includes evidence of the wide-scale impacts of the toxic drug crisis. It also provides evidence to counter stigma around substance use. The position statement explains that prohibition, and not the safe supply model, is responsible for the toxic drug crisis. And it advocates for the adoption of expert recommendations calling for regulated and/or prescription-free alternatives to the toxic drug supply to immediately prevent deaths. These include expanding harm reduction services, redirecting policing priorities, creating regulated dispensing models, and rapidly scaling safer supply programs. The document cites numerous studies which prove that harm reduction and safe supply approaches reduce deaths and serious harm flowing from the toxic drug crisis. The Commissioner acknowledges that these approaches may not be popular, but she stresses the importance of using approaches that are effective in saving lives and respecting the human rights of people who use drugs. By highlighting research-based evidence that supports safe supply models and describing the human rights implications of the government's current prohibition model, this position paper aims to provide enough evidence to counter misinformation around the toxic drug crisis and encourage the replacement of existing policies.
A final action BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner has taken to address misinformation at the systemic level is the development of the Misinformation Can You Stop It campaign and accompanying toolkit of educational resources. As explored in the previous mini-bites, these resources support a deeper understanding of misinformation and equip us with tools to identify it and stop its spread. This toolkit of resources includes the Misinformation Can You Stop It quiz, a web page hosting the quiz, stop tool, and information about misinformation, a video and conversation guide, information about the Community Amplifiers projects, and these mini-bites. By building awareness and strengthening skills, these resources can help us to identify and address individual instances of misinformation. But they also support systemic action on misinformation by equipping the public with the necessary knowledge and skills to address all forms of misinformation. We have explored actions that work to systemically address harms incited by misinformation. These include highlighting the importance of evidence-based information in public debates, recommending changes in policies and practices, providing evidence-based information to counter widely held beliefs that are supported by misinformation, raising awareness of misinformation, and providing tools to identify it and stop its spread. Let's take a moment to reflect. Think about the issue you identified at the beginning of this session. Can you think of an action to address this issue that works at the systemic level using one or more of these strategies? Highlighting the importance of evidence-based information in public debate and decision-making, addressing policies and practices, providing evidence-based information that counters widely held beliefs supported by misinformation, raising awareness of misinformation, or providing tools and skills to identify it and stop its spread. You may wish to pause this recording while you reflect. You can record your thoughts in Handout 1, Question 3.
Thank you for participating in Mini Bite 5, Examples of Actions to Stop the Spread of Misinformation. If you have found this session useful, we encourage you to share it with people who might benefit. We also invite you to download the PDF of this presentation along with the handout package. The handout contains links to information about the Community Amplifiers projects, as well as the work that BCOHRC is carrying out to address misinformation at the systemic level. The examples shared in this session may bring up a variety of feelings, especially if they reminded you of similar impacts experienced by yourself or those you care about. Handout 3 provides a list of supports you may find useful. We've come to the end of BCOHRC's Misinformation Mini-Bites series. Throughout these sessions, we have deepened our understandings of what misinformation is and why it's important to address, how it works, and why misinformation is a human rights issue. And we have considered strategies and practice skills to recognize and stop the spread of misinformation. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about the role we can all play in ensuring that the information we access is verifiable, accurate, and helps to keep us informed and safe.